Welcome to this explainer. Today, we're going to completely deconstruct the terrifying psychological rise of a man whose ambition literally swallowed his morality whole. We're taking a deep dive into Atsumi Ayanokouji. And look, we're not examining him as a father today, but rather as this pure political creature who was forged in absolute, suffocating desperation. We're going to analyze the socioeconomic forces, the crippling inequalities, and those really dark psychological shifts that took a discarded nobody and turned him into the architect of artificial supremacy.
You know, to really get Atsuomi, you've got to look through his eyes for a second. His worldview boils down to this. Japan is a disparate society. They truly represent the difference between heaven and hell. He isn't looking at society objectively. He's staring up from the absolute rock bottom. What he sees is a world fiercely divided by educational disparity, by regional wealth, by generational privilege. And for Atsuomi, these aren't just fancy statistics. They're the invisible, impenetrable walls of a prison he was born into. It's this crushing reality that drills an extreme, do-or-die survivalist mindset into him right from day one. Section 1. The Illusion of Equality.
Think about the sheer whiplash here between his youthful ideals and his actual lived reality. Back in his early 20s, Atsuomi held on to these incredibly shallow, beautiful dreams. He thought he could just carelessly spout idealistic rhetoric, clean politics, raising wages, world peace, and somehow that would be enough to change things. But contrast that with his actual life. He was abandoned as a baby. He was raised in a literal shack without electricity, taking a bath just once a week. He possessed zero generational privilege and was pitifully uneducated. He essentially had to face the sobering, brutal truth that in his society, hard work and naive idealism just cannot overcome a fundamental lack of pedigree.
The turning point in his young life really comes down to a single number, 3 million yen. That was his entire life savings, scraped together through agonizing part-time labor, all poured into his very first election. And he lost, miserably. In this incredibly bitter twist of political irony, because he didn't secure the required number of votes, the government just confiscated every single yen of his deposit. Poof, gone. And this devastating loss didn't just empty his bank account, it completely destroyed whatever idealism he had left. It forced him to wake up to the true long-game mechanics of political power. Elections aren't won with beautiful words. They're won by knowing exactly which organization you belong to, who you serve, and how to manipulate the board.
Moving into Section 2, the have-nots philosophy.
In this political sphere, you are categorized by exactly two things: blood and backing. The have-nots is this defining concept coined by his eventual master, Nae-sensei. It refers to the outsiders, people with no generational wealth, no famous parents, no business tycoons writing checks for their campaigns. Atsuomi realizes that no matter how talented an outsider might be, there is a hard, concrete ceiling to their potential. Being permanently labeled and treated as a have-not forged this crippling inferiority complex within him. But crucially, it also ignited a relentless, highly volatile drive to completely break the system that excluded him.
To even survive as a have-not, Atsuomi had to submit completely to the psychological dominance of Naoe. It's an absolute master and willing slave dynamic. We're talking about a man who literally bowed his head and rubbed his forehead against the tatami mat just to stay in Naoe's good graces. I mean, while other politicians were getting hit with ashtrays and golf clubs, Atsuomi just accepted his utter subservience. Why? Because it was literally the only ladder available to him.
Section 3. Forged in corruption.
We have to deeply analyze the philosophical realism of Atsuomi's world right here, because it's fascinating. In his brand of politics, there's the cynical concept of merits and demerits. Atsuomi realizes that the psychology of the masses is, well, deeply flawed. The public basically believes that if you save 1,000 people but make one single person unhappy, you are inherently evil. Why? Because that vocal minority, just 10% of complaining people, can entirely dominate the media cycle and destroy your career. This cynical mathematics completely skews the whole idea of public achievement. For Atsuomi, it just proves that playing by the moral rules of the masses is a complete fool's errand.
So what does he do? He just stops playing by their rules altogether. Because he had zero backing, his only option was to take on the horrific, dirty jobs that absolutely no one else would touch. He essentially became Naoe's hidden sword. We're talking espionage, utilizing the Yakuza, facilitating high-level bribery, and even pandering to underage girls. He literally weaponized his own lack of privilege. He knew for a fact that if he failed, he'd face criminal charges and total abandonment.
but by willingly stepping over every single ethical line, he erased his own moral compass and made himself entirely indispensable to the party.
Section 4. Ambition replacing morality.
It's this specific, desperate hunger that separates him from everyone else in the room. Just look at a guy like Kamigawa. He's a tame, ignorant leech, comfortably coasting on his father's 30-year political legacy. He doesn't have real ambition. He just wants a safe, cushy job. He is the ultimate have, and Atsumi just utterly despises him, because Atsumi is a discarded piece, a guy constantly risking prison and public ruin just to inch forward a single millimeter. It's this incredibly stark contrast between the absolute complacency of generational privilege and the burning, starving hunger of a man trying to claw his way out of the abyss.
Let's pause for a second, because we really need to interpret the profound symbolism in this next realization. It's my job to polish a plain stone on the side of the road, so that a mere stone will be valued more than a diamond. Atsuomi isn't just talking about grassroots politics here. He's revealing his obsessive, almost terrifying desire to play God. He wants to take pure nothingness, a plain, totally unblessed stone, which is a perfect metaphor for himself, and artificially engineer it into absolute supremacy. He wants to literally prove that the environment he creates can completely shatter the natural advantages of the bloodline elite.
And all of this sets up a deeply fascinating, terrifying, anticipatory contrast. Atsuomi's entire political rise is fueled by his incredibly volatile, flawed humanity, right? It's all extreme inadequacy, anger, desperation, and ambition. Yet his ultimate goal is to create the exact opposite. He seeks to engineer a legacy that is totally devoid of those human flaws, a cold, emotionless, unbeatable perfection. The wild irony is that the very humanity that drove his rise is exactly what he will systematically try to eradicate in his son, Kiyotaka.
Section 5. The ultimate transgression. Picture the tense, incredibly heavy atmosphere as Naoe finally calls Atsuomi into a private room. Naoe acknowledges that Atsuomi is the very first nobody to ever successfully climb the ranks like this, and as a supposed reward, he slides an envelope across the table containing a top-secret human resource development plan. But let's make no mistake here. In the deeply unequal, cutthroat world they inhabit, an offer from a master to a slave is never just an opportunity. It is coercion, plain and simple.
The sheer scale of the risk he's being handed is monumental. Think about the strings attached. First, Atsuomi must unquestioningly accept radical ethical violations, literally experimenting on children from the moment they are born, totally regardless of the human cost. Second, Naoe refuses to provide a single yen. Atsuomi has to secure hundreds of millions in funding purely through his own shady connections. And third, if this ethically abhorrent project gets exposed, Naoe's name gets scrubbed and Atsuomi faces total political death and imprisonment entirely on his own. Yet his blind ambition is so absolute, he doesn't hesitate for a single second.
He looks down at a document that essentially outlines the systemic destruction of childhood for the sake of raw political power, and he just accepts it immediately. This is it. This is the exact chilling moment where his dark political ambition intersects perfectly with a deeply abhorrent educational ideal. Everything he ever suffered as a have-not has led him to this one single conclusion. To conquer the world, he must manufacture a monster. So we're left with this really heavy question. When a society builds its walls so impossibly high that the only way over them is through absolute corruption, who is the real monster? The man who was broken by the system, or the system that demanded he break others just to survive? It all crystallized in one harrowing realization. That was when I learned about the existence of the White Room Project.
Okay, let's jump right back into our analysis. We're now entering the actual beginning of the White Room origin story.
Last time, we ramped up that opening monologue that set up the really dark political atmosphere lurking behind the series. Now, Chapter 1 kicks off the true origin of the White Room. We're going to see exactly how politicians like Ayanokouji's father and Naoe actually plan to create artificial geniuses through extreme education. So this isn't just some dry political drama. It's literally the absolute blueprint of the system that created the characters we know and love.
So we start with Ayanokouji Sr. literally just waiting outside a ryote. He's this guy who completely operates in the shadows. He's willing to wait out there for hours just to bow and scrape to lesser men, all while secretly biding his time to strike. It instantly tells us everything about his immense patience and, honestly, his absolutely ruthless ambition. And when a younger, much more privileged politician actually asks him how he endures that kind of daily humiliation, his answer totally exposes this deeply twisted psychology. He says anyone can do it if they are willing to die for it. It's crazy. He views human suffering and the endurance of just utter humiliation as nothing more than a necessary stepping stone to ultimate power. He literally justifies his actions through this lens of absolute, chilling logic. Now, this isn't just your standard political hierarchy we're looking at here. It's a full-on ideological war. In one corner, you've got Inoe's corrupt, old-school manipulation, the guys pulling strings from the shadows. And then in the other corner, there's Kijima's shining, new-age public reform. Let's really break down these two opposing forces, because this rivalry is the catalyst for literally everything that happens next. So the old guard is led by Naoe Jinosuke. This guy operates almost like a mafia boss, right inside the government. And it's honestly a masterclass in dark psychology, because Senior takes on all the dirty work and outwardly worships Naoe's control, while secretly, and I mean completely secretly, sharpening the knife to eventually crush him. You see, Ayanokouji Sr. climbed the ladder of success as the first among what Naoe calls the have-nots. Since he had zero inherited wealth or some elite family name to fall back on, he adopted this chillingly pure meritocracy. In his eyes, if you aren't useful, you are nothing, period. It's a terrifyingly robotic way to view humanity, right? But it's absolutely crucial for understanding what he goes on to create. Then, totally on the other side of the spectrum, we have Kojima. He's the young, powerful signboard of the Citizens Party, and he actually operates in the light. He is pushing these squeaky clean policies to the forefront, and because of this massive public appeal, he is literally the one thing Naoe's shadow faction deeply fears. And here is where it all clicks into place for the universe we know. Kojima's rising popularity is directly tied to the creation of the Advanced Nurturing High School. By launching ANHS, Kojima basically positioned himself as the ultimate champion of Japan's youth. So the battlefield for political supremacy has officially shifted away from those smoky backroom deals straight into the realm of educational reform. So think about it. If your biggest political rival has just built the ultimate public high school, how do you even counter that? Well, Nao and Ayanokouji Sr. realize they need a radically different solution to combat Kijima. You have to build something hidden, something extreme, and something that produces undeniable, terrifyingly superior results. Enter their terrifying counterplan, the Human Resource Development Plan. This is a massive initiative to take children incredibly early, control their education completely, and artificially produce obedient geniuses. Let's be real, this is not about charity or helping kids out. It is strictly about building hardcore political power through the ultimate, most extreme form of education. And wow, the logistics behind this are just frankly grim. To get the massive secret funding they needed, they actually targeted powerful people who had illegitimate children. They took these hidden kids, completely erased their public existence, and just threw them into these extreme, inhuman curriculums. It's really dark stuff. They officially name it the White Room, pushing the super ironic image of purity while establishing a dark ideology that's essentially meant to manufacture monsters who can rule the world. Their goal wasn't just to make smart students, no. It was to artificially manufacture the top 0.01% of humanity, quite literally by treating human beings entirely as tools. So we really have to ask, how did this exact environment create the Kiyotaka we know? Well, the answer is right here in this philosophy. An environment of total emotional suppression, where talent is artificially forced and extreme efficiency is the absolute only metric of survival. I mean, he was literally built by this system. But here's the catch. To secure continuous funding, those wealthy investors needed proof that the system actually worked. To prove this wasn't just some twisted slaughterhouse, Senior does the unthinkable. He has his own child and puts him into the maximum difficulty level 10 curriculum. And let's be clear, this wasn't out of love. It was purely a fundraising method to prove his ruthless dedication to his investors. Talk about cold. This right here is the sheer horror of their philosophy fully realized. It is the literal reduction of a human baby to nothing more than a disposable political tool. Just a sterile, loveless starting line for the White Room's artificial genius creation. It really puts everything into perspective, doesn't it? But just as the gears really start turning on this whole operation, a massive wrench gets thrown into the machine, and his name is Tokinari Tsukishiro.
He's this incredibly dangerous, mysterious jack-of-all-trades who seemingly comes out of nowhere carrying just an immense aura of authority and, honestly, pure threat. Tsukishiro's arrival is a massive turning point for the story. He makes it abundantly clear that he has been ordered to keep tabs on every single detail of this secret project. Working across all these different party lines, he casually drops the fact that he knows the most intimate, hidden details of Ayanokouji Sr.'s life, like he knows everything. And in that moment, Sr. suddenly realizes a terrifying truth. By launching this grand scheme to manipulate the world, he has inadvertently painted a massive target on his own back. He really thought he was the ultimate puppet master, but Tsukishiro's presence proves that forces way, way above Sr. are watching his every single move. He is now permanently chained to this dark, inescapable project. He can't back out, and he absolutely cannot fail without losing everything. He is bound by this nasty shackle of his own making. And this is exactly where the White Room project officially begins. But, it kind of makes you wonder. When you build a system specifically designed to manufacture monsters, what happens when one of those monsters finally decides to break its own chains?